Good evening. It is my privilege tonight to introduce our keynote speaker, who actually needs no introduction, but it's very important for us to recognize sometimes when we see persons every day, the amount of things that they are doing in service to our territory. Dr. the Honorable Kedrick Pickering has served for 2 terms as Deputy Premier and Minister for Natural Resources and Labor. He also serves as the representative for the 7th Electoral District, which he has represented for 4 consecutive terms. He is recognized as a renowned, please go ahead. This is what we're doing tonight. Let's do it. He is recognized as a renowned international speaker on climate change and environmental issues, while continuing to serve our territory as a medical doctor in the field of gynecology, one of our best gynecologists in the BVI. Please help me to welcome our Deputy Premier, Dr. the Honorable Kedrick Pickering.
Thank you very much, Najan. I wish to acknowledge my honorable colleagues here present, which our Deputy Governor and past Deputy Governors, our past legislators, distinguished senior civil servants, and to especially recognize all you wonderful people. A very pleasant good night to all of you. The 40th anniversary of the end of granting aid is an opportunity to reflect on the importance of the BVI's financial independence, which remains a key pillar of self-determination of the territory. You might recognize those as the words of a policy fellow at the Center for Science and Policy at the University of Cambridge. I speak of one, Mr. Benito Wheatley. Give Mr. Wheatley a round of applause. And so I want to take this opportunity to thank the organizers for inviting me to share a few thoughts here this evening and to apologize because most of you who know anything about me know it's past my bedtime. And I just landed, it was 10 minutes to 8 when I got off the boat from St. Thomas via Miami, via London. So I've had about 3 hours sleep in the last 48 hours. So you know where my brain might be at this point in time. But I was reading an article recently in a magazine, and I've picked up this habit nowadays of when I'm reading to look at the ads and to see what I can glean from the ads. And I came across this article that was advertising one of the car companies, and it had a picture looking into the future, and on the same page, a picture looking into the rearview mirror, looking backwards. And the ad said, looking forward, looking backward is a part of looking towards the future. And I'd like to think that that's part and parcel of what we are doing here this evening, because as I get on in my years, I'm becoming more and more attuned to looking for the wisdom in simple sayings, such as those of us who don't remember our history, we are condemned to repeat it. And so I suspect one of the things we're here doing tonight is that we are looking back from whence we've come. We are taking an assessment of where we are at this point in time. And of course, like the financial secretary was just saying, there's obviously an importance for us to look to the future. So back in 1962, the United Kingdom government appointed a professor from the Institute of Social and Economic Research at the University of the West Indies in the Mona campus, Professor Caroline O'Loughlin. Her remit at the time was to look at the economic prospects of the BVI, what future there was for the BVI, and with specific reference to see how long there might be a time span for the BVI to continue in need of grant aid. This was 1962. Some of you probably are familiar with the report that Professor Lachlan gave. And there were 3 points that she basically raised in her findings, in looking at what the future of the BVI might be. Because back then, more than 60%, 70% of the revenue was based on salaries and just funding the everyday things that we had to do, and the tax base was not sufficient, as you heard the FS just point out. She basically concluded that the BVI didn't have a very bright future. And as far as you could see in the future, the BVI was probably going to continue in granting aid. But she also said that there was a specific issue that was worth looking at for the British Virgin Islands, and it was with respect to tourism. She said that in the beaches, the BVI had the potential to develop a thriving tourism industry, and she gave some specific things that needed to be done at that point in time. Specifically, she referred to the need for air access and other things to build a thriving tourism industry, a point that I'll come back to in a minute. But some of you probably are also familiar with the fact that in that report, she said that it might even be worth considering to remove all of the citizens from these islands and relocate them to Montserrat and Antigua and leave the BVI to become a bird sanctuary. That, I'm sure everybody would have heard that. It was Professor Caroline O'Loughlin in her report. But Dr. Michael O'Neill, in his book, Slavery, Small Holdings, and Tourism, trace our history from slavery to where we were, and then tied it right into that period of time between the early 60s, mid to late 60s, when we had the genesis of our tourism industry. And most of us are familiar that the presence of Lawrence D. Rockefeller and the building of Little Dixby Hotel is seen as the era of modern day tourism in the BVI. And where we are now, where we've come from, where we are going, we need to stick a pen right there, because there's some wisdom in that in terms of where we might be headed. The BVI have had some interesting historical points where things change. And I was reflecting on when it was that we started using the US dollar. And we take it for granted nowadays that we use the US dollar, and I think we think it belongs to us, the way we behave. But it was the wisdom of our leaders that have gone before us in the late 50s, early 60s, that made that decision to petition the British government to allow us to use the US dollar instead of the pounds that we were using at the time. And the late Leslie Malone, I'm told, was one of the key proponents in ensuring that happened. But follow that for a minute to see where we got to with granting aid and where we might be headed in the future. So we had ministerial government in 1967 and another turn of events that we were given some specifics to be able to do for ourselves. And my honorable colleague, the Honorable Ronnie Skelton, likes to say when it comes to constitutional change that when you study the history of the BVI, whenever BVI Islanders were given more authority over their own affairs, the country thrived. There was economic stimulation, and we moved from one level to the next. And then came the period between 1971 and 79. And during that period, we had a group of leaders who were dedicated to ensuring that this place never became a bird sanctuary. And we've heard quite a number of the history of that particular point in time. And that history is extremely important. Why is it important? There's an article that I read recently from, I think it's David Jessup, wrote the article in which he specifically made reference to the fact that not enough Caribbean political leaders, not enough parliamentarians, present and past, are writing. And Mrs. Parsons speak to that all the time, that we as BVI Islanders, we're not a writing people. We're not recording our history for posterity purposes. So understanding that we need to record our history. Why is it important? What Jessup is saying is that unless we do that, the generations to come won't know what was the thinking that led to the decision making at that point in time. So most of us sitting around here probably don't understand, probably don't even think about it. What led to the decision to come out of granting aid at that point in time? What was happening around the table? What them guys were discussing when they were in cabinet or in executive council or around lunch to have led us to that momentous occasion and be able to put us to where we are. So we're celebrating the 40th anniversary of that momentous decision and where it have led us. So we keep looking back to see where we are so we could look towards the future to see what potential there is way off in the future as we move from where we are right now. And then go forward a little further into the 80s. Most of you would have heard of the double taxation agreement between us and the United States that was abolished overnight. And the financial secretary should have mentioned what percentage of revenue was lost literally overnight when the double taxation treaty was abolished. Because if we understand that and understand the quantity of money that was being lost by that decision, we probably would have, some of us at that time would have probably gone to St. Thomas or gone to the States because we would have said the country had no future. It was a significant loss of revenue. But our people stuck to it. Just like they stuck to the task of getting rid of granting aid. Just like they stuck to the task of ensuring that these islands never became a bird sanctuary. And if you have a chance to read nothing else, read a chapter in Mr. Hunt's book, Memoirs of a Caribbean Lawyer. He dedicates an entire chapter to the IBC Act. And he chronicled the entire process of what happened when that decision was taken, step by step, how our leaders grappled with it, how the initial thought about starting this piece of legislation, how that happened, and the work that was done to ensure that ultimately that we had an IBC Act. And Mr. Financial Secretary, there's a very good lesson in there to learn because it spanned two administrations. It started in the administration pre-83, and then it was completed in the administration after 83 when the Honorable C.B. Romney was then Chief Minister. But the interesting thing about what is written there is it gives you a sense of what was taking place around the table and how the decision evolved for us to have got that piece of legislation called the IBC Act, something that is not only historical but affects our daily lives because all of us know what it has done for the economy of the British Virgin Islands, if for nothing else in the direct revenue that we have achieved. So we keep looking back to see where we've come from, where we are, and to understand why it is important to celebrate these momentous occasions. So where are we right now in terms of this whole dialogue, in terms of where we should be headed? And maybe I'll add some of my own thoughts as to exactly what I think, how we should approach it, because the challenge is huge. The challenge is huge. But we could turn around the challenge and just decide to make it an opportunity. We could stop seeing challenges for what they are and just see opportunities. And that puts us on the track to be able to do exactly what we need to do. Because as I stand before you this evening in flesh and blood, I have absolutely no doubts in my mind that we're going to build a great little nation. Absolutely no doubts. The generations to come after us are going to be phenomenal. There's some brilliant young BVI Islanders out there doing some phenomenal work. And it's only a matter of time, given the opportunities, that they will then take over this country. But we need to do things now to ensure that the foundation remains strong and that we will be able to pass the baton at the right time to them. Give it to them. Make sure we don't drop the baton, because it's extremely important that we drop the baton, the race is lost. But here's what I want to talk about, and you leave with you this evening. We're entering a new era in the world. I'm not talking about BVI now. We're entering a new era in the world. There was a time when the world went through the Industrial Revolution. There was a time when the world went through the space revolution, the war between the Soviet Union and the United States that led to the destruction of the Soviet Union. But in today's world, the ocean has become the new frontier. The world is going to go to war over the ocean because that's the new frontier. So much of the ocean, nobody owns it. Nobody knows what is there. Nobody understands the true value, but the ocean dictates every aspect of our daily lives. I attended a conference in Bermuda in May of this year, sponsored by the insurance companies. The title of the conference was Ocean Risks. Risks everything. Because our lives depend on the ocean, and it is even more important in the context of those of us who live on islands. So the issue of the changing climate, so-called climate change, is not something that is a figment of anybody's imagination. It is very real. They're still in Poland, where I just came from, struggling to come up with an agreement that doesn't seem like it is going to happen because the war is on with respect to the ocean. But I just said, instead of us seeing challenges, let us look at the opportunities. What is it about the oceans that is beneficial to us? Where are the opportunities that we can grasp to build the economy that we need to build? Where are the opportunities going to come from? Number of my colleagues talk about small businesses and entrepreneurship and the entrepreneurial spirit of the BV Islander. But the question we have to answer, when we ask it, we must answer it to ourselves. Where are the new jobs going to come from? Where are the new jobs going to be created? We're going through the technological revolution, and we understand and we can see what the technical revolution has done to us in our daily lives. We're tied to cell phones. We're tied to computers. We're tied to iPads. But we're getting over that now, and we're moving into our next revolution, which is the changing climate. All of us went through Irma. It's not a figment of our imagination. We went through Irma. I was told in one of the conferences I attended that Irma is a 1 in 2,000 year storm. But we experience it. We look around in this country right now and we see how green it looked a year ago. And we know something has happened. What is the future looking like? Can we be a part of the future? Can we make the future happen? And can we be a part of the future to ensure that our generations coming could live a life that even us couldn't dream about? I believe that, and I smile every time I hear people talk about the BVI has no natural resources, and I smile. We have an infinite resource. It's called the environment that God blessed us with. Every other person that comes to the BVI, the first thing you hear them, wow, what a beautiful place. Every time I travel and I come back, I am just blown away by how beautiful this place is. Just absurdly beautiful. God give us that. So the critical issue that we have to face is, do we understand the value of what it is we are holding in our hands? About 3 years ago, remember it like I'm standing here. I was in Virgin Gorda for Easter, and I was walking towards Nail Bin. I was just thinking about something. There were 3 major events happening around the time. They had just sunken the World War II ship Kodak Queen. Some of you probably don't know what I'm talking about. The Kodak Queen was one of 5 ships that escaped Pearl Harbor. It was a fuel supply ship in the U.S. Navy that Abe was able, and I had the opportunity to visit Pearl Harbor, and when you see the stories, it blows your mind. That ship escaped. That ship was buried in the British Virgin Islands, had its final resting place in the British Virgin Islands. Around the same time, we had a visit from the Obamas. 2 most important people in the world, right out of the White House, on a jet straight to the BVI. Spent 10 days here. Around the same time, we had something called the Panama Papers. And somebody had done an analysis of all the major news networks that had carried stories about the British Virgin Islands. Do we need to hide our head in the sand like an ostrich and say, why these people talking about us? No, they're talking about us. Let us show our true colors. Let them know who we are. We are not no tax haven. We provide financial services. We provide a service for people to do international business. We must tell our story. How many of you have seen the play Hamilton? Any of you have seen the play Hamilton? At the end of Hamilton, the last scene, they sing a song. Who will tell your story? So you've worked hard all your life. You worked to build a legacy. But who will tell your story? Financial Secretary, we have to tell our story. And we have a good story to tell. Why are these people coming to the Bridge of Ireland? They see something. Do we understand the value of what it is we are holding in our hand? Do we understand the value of the environment that God has blessed us with? The changing climate. I'm told in Poland this week that there is $500 billion sitting there waiting for developing countries to reach out and grasp. And the issue is that the developing countries are not ambitious enough in terms of the projects that they're putting forward. So the overseas territories were invited to be a part of the UK delegation at the COP that I just attended. The BVI was chosen, not Kedrick Pickering. The BVI was chosen to represent all of the overseas territories at the COP. We were part of the official UK delegation, okay? And here's the point we wanted to make them. My technical assistant was from Gibraltar. Here's the point we wanted to make to them. That here's part of the future for the overseas territories, the BVI included. Let us decide that we want to have renewable energy 100% for all overseas territories by the year 2030, year 2040. Let's just decide on a number. And let's just start working towards that. The investment in renewable energy means the creation of jobs. But renewable energy means that it is the cost of our electricity bill is going to diminish. My colleague who head the electricity department is going to say, we can't do it all at once because we have to pay off for our investment tomorrow. So you can't do renewable energy overnight. But we can build systems over the next 20 years, gradually eliminating the use of fossil fuels, making our contribution to the overall healthy environment that we all cherish so much. But that revolution starts to create an avenue for new wealth creation. It is called the blue economy. It is called the green economy. But every overseas territory, the BVI included, if we get renewable energy, the cost of energy production decreases. It means that the cost of electricity to all of us decrease. What that does is that money fuels the economy in several different ways. It has tentacles. If you get 100%, because the sun is free to us, the wind is free to us, the ocean is free to us, all we have to do, and the technology exists now, the expertise exists, and people are just waiting for opportunities to invest the money. If we do that and we follow that pathway for renewable energy, the blue economy becomes a focal point of what we're doing. Our territorial waters extend 200 miles out. And we have something called an EEZ, an exclusive economic zone. We need to ensure that we know what it has in it. We need to value it. We need to know what's in the ocean before other people come and take it out. We know it has fish, but we need to know how much fish and what type of fish. So we could invest in it. But the reduction in fuel costs, the reduction in energy costs will fuel agribusiness. It will fuel fishery sector development. It will fuel small business development. All by making a decision that by whatever year it is, the overseas territories, BVI included, want to be 100% renewable. And we will be leading the way in showing the bigger countries how to make the planet safer, how to make it greener. The ocean exists around us. It's the new frontier. We own it. We have more water than we have land. And so the trust is we must stop saying we live on small island states and say we live on large ocean states. That's the meditation. That's the psychological approach that we have to be taking. That we have large ocean states because of the amount of water surrounding us. But we are doing it right now. Our tourism industry is based on the water. Yachting is now our number one industry. So all we need to do is focus more on adding value to what we have already, by adding value to it, by becoming more sustainable in terms of energy. Our economy thrives. It only thrives because it becomes more sustainable because the sun is free to us. We just need to tap it. By doing that, our tourism product becomes more sustainable. We have Anigata sitting over there, a sleeping giant, could grow any amount of food if we have the energy to do it. We need to do it. FS. So let me wrap up. Having had the opportunity to travel and discuss these things in many forums, I have a fairly good idea of what I'm talking about. It starts with a decision. It started with a decision back in the 50s and 60s that we should use the US dollar. It started with a decision that we needed ministerial government in 1967. It started with a decision to petition the UK government for us to come out of granting aid. It started with a decision that we needed to do something since the double taxation agreement had been abolished. We're at that point in our history right now where we need a big decision. We need a big decision. Where are we going? It's staring us straight in the face. We have it all around us. Let us start focusing on the value of our environment. Let us look at it for what it is and understand the value of what God has placed in our hands. Because people protect. When we were growing up, your parents always had a little silver thing put away somewhere if somebody dropped by, give them a cup of water. You couldn't eat out a certain plate in the house. God, I was for when people come, is passing laughing. They valued it. They protected it. That's the mindset we must take about where we are as a country. We have something that is valuable, but we must show that we appreciate it, we understand it, and that we are going to protect it for the generation to come. You know, this young man here, Benito, and I have traveled far and wide. And I've had, you know, for those of you who probably don't know that Benito is the grandson of the late Honorable Willard Whitley. But I've been more than inspired when I've seen Ben in the international flora and the work that he has done. There are people amongst us, young people, see young Kareem Hall here, who are up and coming. I've traveled with Najan and see her perform at the level of OECS, a gym. We have the pieces here. Angela Bonnet-Penn is a voice on the international scene with respect to climate change. Highly respected in the region and beyond. We need to see our people the value of what it is that we have. So here's what I'll leave with you. I believe being small is a blessing. I believe that the biblical imperative that says, and the lion and the adder and the lamb shall sit down together, and a little child shall lead them. I believe it's us they're talking about. I believe God has blessed us with this tranquil environment that we could create a place where people from all walks of life can come, relax, rejuvenate, and get ready for the next phase of life. But we must believe it. We must become more ambitious. We must think of ourselves as being bigger than we is. Instead of limiting ourselves, we must become more ambitious. We must build a BVI to show the world what can happen and how it can happen. We have the pieces to make it happen. Okay? We must build a BVI brand. I've said this before. All of the great corporations in the world, they subscribe to the policy of three. All the major corporations, ABC, NBC, CNN, BBC, NFL, NHL, Major League. You just start going through. the principle of three, BVI. We have it already. We must build on it. We must see ourselves for the value of what we possess. We mustn't just limit ourselves. We must understand that we hold something very valuable in our hands, because the future belongs to those of us who believe in the beauty of our dreams. So instead of us becoming handicapped by any challenges that might face us, by any problems that might face us, I think we should just look and hold on to the possibilities. I thank you very much.